Hi everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome to this week's Monday assembly ride. My name's Rich. I'm the head coach and founder of RIAK Fitness. We're a coaching outfit. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to give it the old plug this evening, I've decided. But welcome to this Monday assembly ride. If you're new to these sessions, every week we ride a different course. And don't worry, oh there we go, good. My RGT just suddenly paused, but it's back on again. Every week we ride a different course, varying difficulty level. This week is a pretty straightforward one. We're riding the last sort of 32 Ks of stage 6 of the Tour of Norway, which was on last week. So off we go. Again, I think it might be one of those sessions where everything just keeps on freezing, but everything is actually running. So there you go. Yeah, stage 6 of the Tour of Norway. I don't know if any of you guys watched it. I was watching mostly the Giro d'Italia, which I now regret because it was super boring. But I kind of wish I'd watched the Tour of Norway, frankly, because that seemed like it was very exciting. I read about Remco Evenepoel winning one of the stages and putting out some absolutely insane numbers on one of the climbs to win the stage. So much so that I actually think the numbers quoted can't have been accurate. I haven't gone and checked them as to how they stack up against, you know, the greatest ever power stats. But yeah, on first glance, I need to get my information from more reliable sources, maybe. But yeah, it sounded like a more interesting race than the Giro. But I'm interested to see if anyone's got any opinions on that. I was talking about this last week, and my opinion hasn't improved since. I think it was a bad course selection, really. Giro is normally my favourite race. Anyway, so in this week's session, you might be perhaps more interested to know we're going to be talking about cross training and why that's such an important and wise thing to do, really. So I'm obviously making the assumption, really, that everyone joining is, you know, pretty much a pure cyclist, or maybe a triathlete. But yeah, we're going to be making the assumption that you guys are kind of predominantly keen cyclists. Okay, and as we go through the session, guys, just get what you want out of it. So you can, we've got the rubber banding effect on, so it'll keep the whole group together on RGT. So you can ride as hard or as easy as you like, and you should be able to stay with. Okay, say this course, this was sort of one of the sprint stages, so it's a reasonably relaxed course. You've got a couple of little nudges, so you have to keep it interesting, for sure. But otherwise, the Tour of Norway was just up and down. So I didn't think anybody would want to deal with any of those stages because there were some seriously big stuff. But yeah, just get what you want out of it. You can ride as hard or as easy. I know a lot of people use these rides as a recovery ride. You do the big training on the weekend and then just want something to poodle around and listen to me drone on. So we're talking about cross training, but I did, when we got started, just say I'll give a quick plug. So I just want to say a couple of things about some of our coaching relationships, and in particular we're working hard to develop an on-demand offering. Now of course there's tons of training platforms out there offering fantastic training sessions, etc. But what we're really keen to do, and our thing as a business, is about providing knowledge. So if you like these sessions, you like to learn a little bit whilst you ride, take a look at the on-demand page on our website, because we've got some great training there backed up with information, really, you know, learning whilst you ride, or even training plans that will teach you stuff, not just get you fit. Okay, so that's all I'll say about that, guys. Just a quick shout out. We've been working very hard on our on-demand content. Head to the website and check that out. Particularly if you're into your cycling, you want to learn more rather than just get fit. We like to think we can do both. So there you go. That's that. And we'll just get back to the riding and just relaxing. So you'll see me. I'm towards the front, I think, rolling around at I try to roll around about 2 watts per kilo. So if you see me, give me a little wave, an RGT. And a little reminder that if you've got any questions at any point, guys, as we go through the session, always very welcome to ask your questions. So for the guys that are on Zoom, just feel free to unmute yourself and we can have a chat away. I really don't, absolutely no issue with anyone unmuting himself. In fact, I strongly encourage you at any point, if you've got any questions, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can use the Zoom chat. There is, of course, the chat feed in RGT, which mercifully is working for me tonight. Often it doesn't. And then, of course, for those guys that are joining the live stream on our various social media channels and the social channels of our streaming partners, the Cycling News, you can leave comments on the stream and we'll pick those up as well. Okay, so hopefully everyone's getting warm and just generally kind of relaxing into the session. Bear with me a second whilst I move a few things around on my screen and get my notes up. You might be surprised that I do actually do notes to these sessions. It often comes out as a bit of a stream of consciousness, but there is actually something in front of me. Which either means I deliver it in a natural way, or maybe I just shouldn't bother doing notes. But yeah, our topic this evening is cross training. Now, this is a kind of a bit of a buzzword, really, isn't it? You know, you have people ask you all the time, "Oh, do you do it?" You talk about, "Oh, I'm a cyclist," and you know, "Oh, do you do any cross training?" Now, what the hell does that mean? It can mean anything, really, which is, I think, the problem with this subject, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because the message when it comes to cross training often gets lost because it's such a broad concept. It basically just means doing anything that isn't your primary sport or form of exercise. That's kind of how I'm defining it. And like I say, we're going to assume that you rather like cycling, and that's kind of like your thing. That's your primary form of exercise. That's your primary sport. And so when we're talking about cross training, we pretty much mean anything that isn't cycling. And tonight I'm going to focus on running and strength training, because that's what we experience. That's what we find people tend to do when we talk about cross training. Even if that means, you know, running in the form of tennis or something, you know, that's still running. Obviously you've got added components to it, but generally running and strength training, kind of the things I'm going to be talking about, can apply to the vast majority of other sports and activities. Okay, so I don't think it would take much to kind of extrapolate what we're going to say tonight and apply it to other things. But I will just start with one massive benefit of cross training before we go into kind of the science of what happens when you do kind of other forms of exercise. I think one thing I really just kind of want to say is it's so good to take something a little bit less seriously. So good for your mental health. So if you do something other, if you've got like your primary sport that you work hard at, you really want to get fitter, you know, maybe you like a bit of e-racing, you want to get better at that, or you're a triathlete, you know, if you are approaching a sport in a focused and structured way, or you focus your training in a focused and structured way, it's really good to also do something else which you don't do in that structured way, and you just do because you enjoy it. Because that's kind of where you can find your escape. We've talked in other sessions about kind of the negative mental health benefits of training in such a structured and sometimes religious type way. But it's so great to kind of have something that you don't. You know, I've mentioned tennis already. We've got a few triathletes that like a bit of tennis. Personally, it's just a nightmare because they're just, none of their training supports tennis, because there's constantly changing directions, like the risk for kind of ruptured Achilles or rolling an ankle or whatever. It's just it's it. But you know, you got to enjoy stuff, don't you? But yeah, I think, and particularly if it's something you're not very good at. I know that sounds silly, but I love trying sports that I'm crap at, because I don't care that I've got my thing that I like to think I'm quite good at. It's nice to kind of be a complete amateur at something and just enjoy it for what it is, and to have a bit of a laugh. Because essentially it's playtime, isn't it? You know, it's adult, like, I was going to say adult playtime, but that sounds like something else. Yeah, we'll move on. So even if you're rubbish at something and you're just doing a bit of cross training, just sort of do something, and it doesn't have to be just one thing you do that's cross training. You know, if you like, I love all kinds of sports. You know, I play a bit of tennis, love a bit of squash, hockey, but never actually play that. Football, whatever it is. You know, it doesn't have to be you've got your main sport and then you got one other thing that you cross train. It can be anything, all kinds of different things. Yeah, I mean, I do a little bit of cyclocross or gravel riding, and I did a cyclocross race earlier this year. I was absolute crap. Like, my fitness was really good at the time, but like my racing craft for cyclocross was just terrible. And I had a great time because I wasn't one of the guys on the rollers before the race getting psyched up. I was in the sandwich eating a ham, cheese and pickle sandwich, which was, I knew, a massive mistake, but I was starving, and lo and behold, it was horrible, the whole race, just sitting in my stomach. But that, that's just an example, I think, of the joy of not doing something else and not taking it so seriously. So yeah, that's just the one kind of more what's the expression, psychological benefit to cross training. It's basically just doing something else that isn't the normal thing that you kind of potentially obsess about. Okay, but one of the things, I'm just going to move on and focus on kind of the more sciencey and physiological rather than psychological benefits of cross training, and that's the importance of load-bearing exercise. Again, I think this is probably the primary point that I'll make this evening, really. So if you don't listen to me for the rest of any of the session, just listen to the next 5 minutes or so, because I think it's super important. Just going to pause very quickly just to check in case any comments have come in whilst I've been talking. Okay. Yeah, so the importance of impact or load-bearing exercise is probably the key point for this evening's session. So I'll start with the science. Basically, the human skeleton will generally reaches full maturity around age 25, there or thereabouts. And you kind of have two types of cell that are involved in bone maintenance. You've got osteoblasts, which build new bone, and then osteoclasts that clear old bone. So you've got the two working all the time, one building new bone, one clearing it kind of old, dead, but not dead, but old bone away, etc. So you've got the two working together, and then kind of around 25, age 25, they become essentially equally as active. So you reach kind of like a bit of a stalemate, and that means peak bone mass is achieved. And then thereafter, generally your bones still kind of strengthen, but they're not kind of, building as such. Okay, and they continue to get stronger until about 35 years old, which is roughly when you hit the tipping point, which is alarming. So I turned, 34 last week. So I basically got 1 year left of being at roughly some sort of peak, which is worrying because I definitely don't feel it. So from here though, essentially your osteoclasts, the one that break down bone, they become more and more dominant, and we start to lose bone density. Now don't panic, guys. It's not like overnight suddenly you're brittle boned. It's it's a steady decline, very steady decline, and you start to lose bone density, which ultimately, if unchecked, if you did nothing, and then quite extreme circumstances, can lead to osteoporosis. So you need to do something to stem the flow, basically. So as well as adequate calcium intake in your diet, you need regular weight-bearing exercise, such as walking or running, two kind of obvious ones. It's super important. I'm saying this because, as I say, I'm assuming you're a cyclist, so a lot of your exercise is done on a bike, which is kind of considered, it's not non-weight bearing, but it's largely non-weight bearing. Okay, so this is why this is important to cyclists, and this is why load bearing exercise is important to cyclists, because as muscles pull on bones via the tendons to kind of make joint movements, they stimulate blood circulation and the delivery of nutrients to the kind of the areas around the bones, the muscles, the soft tissue. And this is what assists with strengthening bones. So when you're stressing the bones in a certain way, through walking, through that impact, when you're stressing them in that way, they will adapt, grow, and become, denser to be able to handle that exercise. Whereas, if you flip it the other way, if you don't do that, basically all those nutrients, etc., they are pushed to a greater degree towards working muscles rather than kind of impact. So if you're just cycling, you'll get really good kind of muscle tone, you'll get strong, but those bones won't be as dense and strong as they could be. So that is why load bearing exercise is so important, particularly if you're a cyclist, and that's why cross training is so important. Because if your primary form of exercise, swimming, cycling, long and load bearing exercise is long, you might unwittingly end up with a lack of bone density, and you see it in pro cyclists as well. And it's simply because your body has prioritized cardiovascular and muscular developments at the neglect of bone density. Okay, so that's the kind of the big point. If you don't, the expression "use it or lose it" is actually incredibly relevant in that context. Oh, we're gonna have a freezy screen tonight, aren't we? It'll come back in a second. My RCT screen's just frozen a little bit. which is good actually, because I'm falling off the back, so maybe I can get back on before it gets. Oh no, you caught me. Yeah, so that's kind of the primary point of this session, the importance of load-bearing exercise. And you can see why I now say I'm just going to focus on running and strength training, because really running covers a lot of sports. So tennis, as I said earlier, although it's a coach's nightmare, you know, so it's impact running, isn't it? So walking is usually a very good starting point if you're doing very little kind of weight-bearing exercise. And I'll be honest guys, if I didn't do triathlon, I was thinking about this morning actually, if I wasn't a triathlete and forced myself to run, because I'm not a natural runner, I'm more of a natural cyclist I'd say, and the amount of time I spend on the bike doing these sorts of sessions, I do very little load-bearing exercise other than strength training. You know, I force myself to go out for a walk as much as possible, but like really, I would be doing a shockingly small amount of load-bearing exercise, I think, if I didn't force myself to run. And so it's very easy to do. You can be super fit, but if you're not taking heed of these sorts of things, it can cause you to end up somewhere you don't really want to be. Okay. Saw something coming on RGT. I was just saying, someone saying hello. So just kind of one word of caution for anybody that is cycling and wants to get into a load-bearing form of exercise. Running, of course, is a fantastic sport, incredibly cheap form of load-bearing exercise. You know, you don't need any kit, really, just need a pair of shoes and off you go. And it's fantastic in that respect, you just do it whenever you want. Cycling, there's a lot of faff, isn't there, let's face it. But if you're not already a regular runner, getting into running can be fraught with injury risk. I see it all the time. More often, to be honest, more than actually it's something I find, I just think it just should not be the case. Like, we should all know this stuff. But of course, people think, sorry, I shouldn't say that actually, because it's totally justifiable, because we're never taught this stuff. But people think, I want to take up running, or they're on holiday or something, and so they go running every day. They go crazy, and end up injuring themselves. And you have to kind of remember, if you've not run in a long time, your body is simply not equipped to deal with the forces that are suddenly going through your joints and through your bones. And so getting into running can be hugely frustrating for those that have a good level of cardiovascular fitness. So cyclists, you know, they know what they can do on a bike. They might be able to ride up on 2 as many times as they want. But running 5k can actually be super fraught with the risk. And so it's really important, I think one of the messages I want to get across is, if you are a pure cyclist, you don't do much load-bearing exercise now, and you want to start, be super careful, okay? Your body's just not going to be prepared for suddenly pounding the pavements, because all the bone density considerations discussed above. And you know, so you're at risk of stress fractures, would probably be my primary concern, but then also issues with your Achilles and hamstrings, which I'll talk about in a minute. And yeah, when you're approaching run training, you have to think about it as, yes, my cardiovascular fitness may or may not be good, but that's not what you're trying to improve. When you first start running, you're trying to stimulate other physiological adaptations before you can then start to kind of test your fitness as such. Now, I just mentioned Achilles and hamstrings. These are also very common areas to injure when people start running, coming from a cycling background. And it's because if you think about the pedal stroke, there's always a bend in your knee at the bottom of the pedal stroke, usually around 15 degrees or something, I think that is right. Just as a very rough general rule. And you repeat that movement thousands and thousands of times. And what it causes is a shortening of your hamstring, or at least a kind of a build-up of tension, because at no point are you fully extending the joint. You're never fully extending the hamstring. And so if you're doing that thousands and thousands of times, you can just kind of imagine that hamstring getting shorter and tenser. And so then if you suddenly start go outside and go for a run, particularly a run at intensity, you're suddenly asking that hamstring to go through its full range of motion whilst incredibly tense and stiff. So you can easily see it just go ping, okay? And similarly with your Achilles, when you're in the pedal stroke, you rarely kind of drop the heel fully. And so it's kind of like wearing high heels all the time. Your Achilles kind of shortens and gets stiffer. And so again, if you go out running and you're asking your Achilles to kind of go through a longer range of motion, Achilles tendinopathy is a super common one for cyclists, if not, well, hopefully not Achilles rupture and things like that. But yeah, so if you decide to cross train by getting to running, you want to start to build that bone density. You want to start mitigating the loss of bone density. And even if it's not just running on its own, if it's a sport involving running, like tennis, or squash or team sports, you want to join your mate's five-a-side team every now and then. It's not just bone density, it's muscles, soft tissue that also need time to develop, and you really have to kind of ease into it. And so if you're talking about running in particular, starting with run walking, okay, I do it when I'm coming back from injury or illness, rather than a normal hour run. I'll break it up with sort of into sectors with a little bit of walking, just to kind of bring the intensity down, give yourself a little bit of time to recover and time to kind of get back to running with good form. There's no shame in run walking. It's a perfectly legitimate kind of approach to training. We use it with our athletes all the time. And if you are interested in getting into running, this isn't actually intended to be a plug, although I guess it kind of is, but we actually have a 5k builder plan, which is a lot more conservative than a lot of the kind of couch to 5k plans that I see out there. And it also is coupled with a strength program. Okay, and I just recommend having a look, or considering that at least, if you're thinking about getting into running, starting from a low kind of frequency, or a low base, running base at least, because you have to kind of really accept that getting into running is going to take a long time, and it necessarily needs to, and you should be patient. So that's just an FYI. And as I said earlier, you'll likely get frustrated with the lack of progress when it comes to running, particularly if you're following a plan like I just described, because the issue is not going to be with your fitness, your cardiovascular fitness. It's going to be about stimulating those physiological changes so that you can eventually develop the fitness. Okay, so I just wanted to really make sure that point was clear in terms of taking care when it comes to running, or as a form of cross training. Super amazing benefits, but also some risks. So be really patient with it. And of course, guys, if you ever need any advice, you can always email us, or we do coach consultations where for a small fee, you can just book a coach to talk to for an hour, about training, hopefully. But it's something just to consider if you ever feel lost and in need of some professional advice. We're always at hand in one form or another. Okay, just have a quick pause now to drink and to just check all the social channels. But if anyone's got any questions on what I've spoken about so far, now's a really good time to shout. So of course, unmute yourself on Zoom, use the Zoom chat, use the RGT chat, or comment in on the live stream, wherever you're watching this. Okay. All right, I think we're motoring along pretty well on the course. Half an hour in, halfway through. Anything else is good for you is running. That's from Matt. Good question. I assume you mean in terms of kind of provoking the same sort of bone density benefits and kind of encouraging soft tissue and muscles to adapt to loading and stress. Yes, basically running and walking are the best, really. I'm going to be talking about strength training and the benefits of that shortly. But yeah, I mean, if you're not a runner, then, or you don't see yourself as a runner or far away, you know, not being anywhere close to being a runner, because like, let's face it, you might just also hate it. You know, and we talked, I said right at the start, cross training, one of the things that can be great about it is from a mental health perspective, is kind of giving you a release. If you don't want to do something you bloody hate, but I would suggest, if you don't like running, then walking, hiking, you know, I know it's basically the same thing but just a slower version, but personally I think there's a lot to be said for just going for a long walk, and yeah, again, it's impact, it's stress on your body, you know, it might not provoke the same kind of dramatic effect or cardiovascular fitness effect as running, but it's still really good form of loading. So yeah, if you don't like running, go hiking, get walking. You know, so many great places to see, and I think when you are cycling and running, it is quite easy to miss stuff as you go by, whereas when you're walking, it can be, you can just appreciate things a little bit more. Yeah, that's a great shout. So I think it's Phil, isn't it? Yeah, Phil just said, try paddle tennis. Great fun, lots of mobility, longer rallies and tennis, and not all dependent on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're talking about, you know, what you hate running. Trick yourself into it with racket sports and the like. I absolutely love squash. That's always a good one. There's lots of heavy stepping in doing that. But yeah, no, yeah, it's hard to really see something that stresses you in the same way as running and walking, because it's kind of what we're built to do, you know. Finding ways to trick yourself to do it might be the way forwards. So yeah, so far we talked about what cross training is. We talked about the kind of the science behind bone density, and how as you get older it starts to diminish, and why that's a bad thing. And we just talked about, if you're interested in getting into running as a way of cross training and kind of mitigating that bone density loss, be very careful. And I talked about why, and I talked about a few resources you can use to help with it. But I think also, just sort of finishing off on the running, it's kind of instinctive, I think, as to how much is enough. I think often people just get carried away, but I think actually if they took the ego out of it, it'd be pretty instinctive, and they'd be able to manage it pretty well. But no, many of us aren't that great at it, myself included. So the next one I was going to talk about is strength training. Now, the reasons for strength training, going to the gym, what are lifting weights, the reason for that is being like a form of great cross training. They are similar to those of running, pretty much the same, to be honest, just a few added extras. The loading will stimulate that bone growth, that soft tissue development, which is incredibly important to sustain as we get older. And there's a couple of kind of extra things to go with strength training though, and because it's super important to also maintain muscle mass. So as we get older, our ability to build muscle and sustain muscle mass diminishes. Okay, similar to bone density. Okay, our ability to build that muscle mass, it just wanes, I'm afraid. And so, similar to dealing with bone density, we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to kind of maintain muscle mass. And I'm not talking about muscle mass in the sense of, being stacked, just general healthy amount of muscle, so you can do like the stuff that you do in an ordinary day. Because I think it can come as quite a shock to people when suddenly they can't do stuff, like basic stuff that they've done all through their life. Silly little things like being able to lift the sofa up to get the remote control that's fallen underneath or whatever. It can be something stupid like that, and it can be quite upsetting, I think, just from people that I've talked to that kind of later stages in life, and have had these experiences and then come into sport at a later life. It can be really quite upsetting. So I just think we all have to try and future-proof ourselves, really. And I'm not going to go into a political diatribe about the burdens on the NHS, about with obesity, etc. But that's kind of important. You don't want to be reliant on medicines and things as you get older. You want to maintain your independence as much as possible, I'm sure. And so strength training comes into that. And it's not necessarily about powerlifting, doing cleans and jerks. It's doing kind of just a basic amount of focused, well-balanced strength training. Now, cycling, we're bringing it back to kind of our main sport, is a posture killer. I've talked earlier about the tight hamstrings, and I bet that got a few nods as I said it. Cyclists are notorious for being inflexible and having poor mobility. Just right now, if you think of it, look at the way I'm sort of sat in flex position. I've spent all day sat in a flex position at my laptop. I'm now in a flex position again. I'm quite good at it, but often you'll see people riding like this with their shoulders around you're like this all day anyway on the keyboard. And so cycling is it actually is terrible for posture. And so strength training is, either way I see it, as actually someone put this really well the other day. It's basically an enabler. Strength training is something you do to be able to do what you actually enjoy, which I think is a really good way of putting it, because it allows you to do what you want kind of guilt-free and not having to worry about it. And I think, just coming into more specifics, if you think about what's actually going on there. You're putting a asymmetrical human onto a symmetrical machine. And humans were so weird and wonderful. Nothing about us is symmetrical. You know, we've all got leg length discrepancies, at least to a certain extent. You know, pelvic misalignment, scoliosis in the spine, all kinds of stuff. You know, we're weird, and you know that's why the body's so cool. But if you think about putting that asymmetrical kind of wobbly human on a solid symmetrical bike, you know, you're going to get muscular imbalances, and they're going to be kind of exaggerated through cycling. Okay, and that's one of the things that strength training can really help to address. So that's where single limb exercises are so key for kind of rebalancing what you do on the bike. So that's split squats, lunges, calf raises, that sort of well, single leg calf raises anyway. So they're excellent for kind of just keeping things in balance and keeping some at least a degree of symmetry. You know, the classic one is Rafael Nadal's. God, we're really on a tennis theme today. Maybe it's because Roland Garros is on, but you know, Rafael Nadal notoriously has one bicep much bigger than the other, and then was like, oh, that's amazing. Looking at it from a coach's perspective, I'm like, that has to have some sort of detrimental physiological biomechanical effect, just in terms of, you know, ballast even. You know, if he's much bigger on one side than the other, that has to affect the way his foot lands and his weight shifts to one side, etc. And that to me is a classic example of a ridiculous muscular imbalance, which, I mean, who am I to say, you know, that he's a multiple Grand Slam winner, etc., etc. But to me, if I see that in an athlete, I'd want to address that. So strength training helps to mitigate those muscular imbalances, but it's also can be great for improving mobility, simply by encouraging you to move joints through their full range of motion whilst they're under stress, whilst they're under loading. Now, it's important to ensure to kind of emphasize this point that when you are performing exercises and if we're talking about moving them through the full range of motion, you need to make sure your form is correct, and be conservative with the weight and focus on moving that joint through the full range. Okay, I'll give you a classic example. Just half repping the shit out of some squats with a load of weight, with a load of plates on a barbell. All you're doing is layering that shortening effect on your hamstring that you're achieving through cycling. You know, it's doing more harm than good. It might feel great, it might look cool, and it does look cool when you're loading up plates on a barbell, don't get me wrong, but it's not a long-term training strategy. And so take the weight off, make sure you're doing things properly. If you don't know how, get help. And it's one of my bugbears actually. I don't really use a gym anymore because we've got all our own equipment, but you go to gyms and you see trainers just sitting around. Like, that's not their job. Their job is to help people. So if you don't know how to do an exercise, make them earn their bloody money. They're being paid to be on the floor. They're not just there as glorified health and safety inspectors. They're there to do a job. Make them bloody do it. It really bugs me. And I don't get those trainers being there and not helping people. I wouldn't be able to stop myself. So yeah, make the buggers work for their money. Another kind of classic example of an exercise which can improve your mobility is the old calf raise. This is a classic rehab exercise for any a number of Achilles problems. Now the key with the calf raise is just making sure that you're dropping your heel when you're doing it. And what that's going to do is just start to encourage length back to that Achilles. Okay, so yeah, strength training is a fantastic way of adding impact, adding loading, particularly if you start, once you get experience, start doing kind of plyometrics, you know, jumping, bounding, etc. Which do not do, by the way, straight away. Build up to that. I actually remember talking to a British cycling strength coach, and I was asking him about plyometrics. I was like, with your track sprinters, etc., do you do much? And he's like, nope, because their Achilles would explode for the exact same reasons that we've discussed tonight. You know, they spend all their time on the bike, the Achilles shortens, they do a bound or a jump from a box, Achilles explodes. So yeah, other words of caution in there, but strength training, fantastic for helping to improve or that bone density or mitigate bone density loss. Great for improving kind of strength of your soft tissue and also improving mobility around the joint. And of course, as I said on a couple of occasions, improving muscular balance, which just gets destroyed by sitting on a bike. So that's strength training. And now one of the final things I was going to talk about, I will take a quick break, but one of the last things I was going to talk about is the question I often get asked, which is, can cross-training in one sport directly improve performance in another sport? I will talk about that next. Just need to catch my breath a little bit, have a swig of water, and just leave a bit of time for people to ask any questions if they have them. Let's do rounds of all the various chats. Tea is being very sticky tonight. For anyone that's interested, basically I've got two computers running and I'm running what's called an NDI between them. So basically pushing the content from one to another to try and lessen the processing speed on the main computer, but it's not working so well today. That's why it keeps jolting. Oh well. First world problems. So yeah, we've got about just over 5k left of the course, so we'll probably finish quite quickly actually. I think less than the 15 minutes kind of left of the notional hour, I think, maybe, although we have got a little bit of a lip. Yeah, we should be okay on time though. So yeah, cross training. Can cross training in one sport kind of directly improve performance in your chosen sport? Now, the answer, the kind of blunt answer is, it's really hard to measure direct performance transfer. I'm not quite sure how you could measure it really. I think the general consensus is that you don't really get a pure direct transfer, because your body is so incredibly specific in the way it adapts to a stimulus. Now, the obvious one that I often come across and talk about is swim technique and running gait. Like, swimming technique and running gait is super individual. You know, we obviously have our methodology that we use to help swimmers improve their technique, but the one things that we always stress is it takes a huge amount of repetition to improve your swimming technique. Even just kind of, so one of the principles of swimming is kind of keeping your hand outside the midline of your body to kind of improve your balance, and just moving your hand 2 inches to the right regularly, consistently on a stroke, and then also doing that at intensity, months, because it's just so specific and it just takes such repetition. And when it comes to running gait, we don't even deal with that, because it's only really, in my opinion, elite level performers who benefit from addressing gait or perceived gait issues, because the vast majority of us just would run with better form simply through strength training and through improved conditioning, really, to be honest. So I'm just use that to illustrate that your body is incredibly specific. Yeah, again, coming back to our tennis theme, I've really got it in for tennis tonight. You repeat an action thousands and thousands of times. It's not just your muscles that are getting stronger and more efficient. It's actually the connection between your brain and the muscles that improves, becomes more efficient. Your neuromuscular kind of transmissions become more effective, sped up. Okay, and so a lot of the time, actually, perceived performance benefits, they're not necessarily kind of muscular developments as such. A lot of the time, it's what we call muscle memory. You repeat an action thousands of times, and you just become more efficient at it. So that's kind of where particularly if it's a quick improvement, that's where a lot of it can be found. But that also therein lies kind of the specificity principle. You're basically that performance. A lot of the performance comes down to kind of what's going between your brain and your muscle, rather than kind of improving a muscle and then being able to take it to another sport and use it as you want. It doesn't quite work like that. You use a muscle in a specific way, it will get good at being used in that specific way. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. It's super difficult to kind of measure any direct performance benefits crossing over between sports. However, whilst cross training might not automatically make you better at another sport simply through fitness developments, you can see transferable benefits in other respects. Improvement to reaction times, classic one from tennis, reacting to that ball flying at you at 70 miles an hour. If your main sport is a sport that even requires even the slightest kind of element of reactivity, so if you're a crit racer, shit is going on all the time. There's just bodies all over the place, wheels, and so having a regular kind of stimulus that kind of provokes attention and focus and reactivity, that can only be a positive, can't it? I mean, there's a reason you'll see F1 drivers doing all the light pressing malarkey. It's not driving a car, it's working on kind of their responsiveness. There are various ways you can introduce improvements to sport. I've talked about just doing something fun you don't take too seriously. That in itself can be a benefit, because if you're just happier, you perform better. It's that simple. So having an avenue to have a release of some description, it can have a seriously good benefit from a psychological perspective, and therefore performance benefit. And if we come back to the strength training, that might not have, just being able to squat more might not directly improve your ability to put more power through the pedals, but your improved core conditioning from holding a weight steady. There's a huge amount of core involved in the squat. And having that core conditioning can give you a stronger platform to work with in cycling. So just being able to hold your central pillar more steady, that's going to give you a stronger platform from which to produce power, which I would say is a direct performance benefit. Okay, it's just not in the respect that you might naturally think. Improve core conditioning, holding yourself in position on the bike for longer, and just simply building more lean muscle mass. By definition, that's going to give you more muscle fibers to recruit when cycling. So yes, that muscle mass that you increase, it's not tuned to work in the way that you want, but it can be. You know, if you build that muscle mass and then kind of develop it for cycling purposes, you've got more muscle. It's that, you know, you've got more muscle to recruit, and as long as your training is blended in the right way, you can make use of that extra muscle mass. And just feeling stronger within yourself, again, can do wonders for your confidence, for your mental health. You know, being able to lift heavy shit, it makes you feel better within yourself, and I don't think anybody can deny that. And again, if you apply it in a more direct sense, having a bit of upper body strength will help you wrestle the bike. I think the days are gone where cyclists did no upper body work, because particularly if you think about sprinters or the guys that are sort of punchers, they're having to wrestle the bike all the time, so they need strength in that upper body. Otherwise, you know, they just can't control the bike as how they want to. And I guess another indirect way, and kind of linked to what I've already said really, but being strong in particular muscle groups as a result of doing one sport can provide a great foundation to kind of retrain that muscle for another sport. You know, what classic example of that is rowing. Rowers often, particularly if they row at a high level, find it very easy to transfer to cycling. There's other reasons beyond physiological. They usually have a great work ethic. They have a great approach to training. They know how to train consistently and to look after themselves. But they also usually have super strong glutes and hamstrings. And the glutes in particular are an area that the vast majority of us are weak. So if you come from a sport that has really good glute development, it's going to help you in cycling. Team sports involve a lot of sprints, you know, running, football, hockey, those sorts of sports. We often see that people that grew up playing team sports like that have a naturally higher short duration power on the bike, and that's because they just have this naturally as a kid, from playing those sports as a kid, have a higher ratio of fast twitch muscle fibers. So the benefits of kind of cross training might not be direct, they might not be immediate or even quantifiable, but I can't see how you could argue against the benefits of cross training really, particularly not when it comes to the point you made right at the start about bone density and muscle wastage and things. And there actually is perfect timing, because that is me done with my little chat, and that's that with the course. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. I will stick around, of course, for anyone that's got any questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to what we've been talking about in this session, but hopefully there's at least something you can take away from that, guys. Basically, get cross training if you're not already, but be careful if you do. And of course, we're always here to help if you've got any questions. No worries, guys. Thanks very much for your company. As I say, if you've got any questions, always very happy to answer them. Just check social channels. Yeah. If you think of anything in the meantime, guys, or you think of something totally unrelated for the next session, we do take requests. Okay, so we've done a few sessions off the back of somebody asking a really good question. So if there are particular topics you'd like us to discuss as well, please do send us your requests. Always very interested to know what people really care about. Because as I say, you know, if you're asking a question about it, then it tells us that it's a topic you guys are interested in. So feel free to hit us with any requests, guys. But otherwise, if no one's got any questions beyond what we've already had, I will. I'll sign off and bid you farewell. Cool. Thanks very much, guys. Have a great day wherever you are.